Thank you for joining us for the 10 must-haves for Google Drive organization today. So we're going to go ahead and start by opening up Google Drive. Now there's a few different ways you can do this. One way is by opening up a tab in Google and going to the top right corner to the Google Apps, or we call it the waffle, and then you can click on Drive and you can access that way. You can also go through the portal, the GC portal, and access that way. Now, I already have mine in folders. I'm going to click on my Google folder. I'm in my student account, so when I click on Google Student, it will take me to my Google Drive. So those are just a few ways that you can access it. Whenever you're in your Drive, the first thing that we're going to talk about when it comes to organization are just a few things that you can tidy up before you start creating folders and creating documents in here. So one thing that I do want to show you is the advanced search tool at the very top. Whenever you click on this, you're able to decide where all you want to search in your documents for specific items. And so in mine, the way I have mine set up right now, I have a whole bunch of files and it's a little unorganized. So there's two ways you can view your files. You can look at them like I have them right now, like with a thumbnail, or in the top right corner, you can change it to list view. And when I do that, I can see that I have some that are untitled, some I have a copy of, a whole bunch that have IMG for image, and then at the very bottom, we have some more untitled documents and some screenshots. So one recommendation is to first look at these different ones and maybe rename them. So if I use the advanced search tool, I can search all the documents, and I suggest starting with owned by you, owned by me, and then in the title, you could try, okay, let's just search for untitled docs. We opened up docs or slides or forms and we didn't make a name for it, so it's sitting there untitled. And let's start by looking in my drive. If you start with those three, it can help you filter. So here I just have all of my untitled documents. It also includes a copy of an untitled document and one that starts with a little pear icon. So if you were to do it just in alphabetical order, they wouldn't all be together because the emoji would put it first, copy of would be with the C's and things like that. So you can rename these docs. If you right click, you can go to rename, and instead of untitled vocabulary list, I could put Pear Deck vocabulary list instead. And we recommend doing that. That way, whenever you start sorting, you're not dealing with a lot of untitled ones. You can also do that for copies of, or like those screenshots that I showed you. We recommend that first step. And then once you've cleaned up the names a little bit, then you can start organizing by adding folders. I already have a few folders here, but whenever I looked at those untitled ones, I noticed that I had a lot of Pear Deck items, but I don't have a Pear Deck folder. So there's a few ways to add a new folder. In the top left corner, you can hit new and you can create a new folder. You can upload a file from your computer. You can also upload an entire folder if you needed to. So if I open up something, I could upload an entire folder if I wanted to. Another way to add a folder is if you right click, it gives you the same options. So I can click new folder and I can create a Pear Deck folder. So creating folders is one of the first steps that you'd want to do, because that way you have a place to put all these documents. When you have so many just docs sitting there, it gets really hard to find what you're looking for. So if you created a few folders, and then you can just start moving your docs into it, your files. You can just start moving them into there. So there's a few different ways. If I'm this close, if my Pear Deck lessons here and my folders here, I can just drag it in there. I can just drag it and drop it in there. That's one way I can do it. But if I'm at the very bottom and I'm trying to move something like this, and I can't drag it as easily, there's a few options. I can actually drop down over here on the left side and look at my folders that way. And you can also right click and go down to organize and then go to move. They actually renamed these fairly recently, and I think it's really helpful. And then you can move. When you click move, it gives you some suggested options. These are folders you've been in recently, your starred ones, and all locations. So you can actually look in your drive, share drives, elsewhere. So I'm actually going to go with my Pear Deck folder since that's what we're working on. And now it has moved that document into my Pear Deck folder. So there's a few different ways to move your documents in there. And once you get your documents in there, you can also go a little bit further. You can add another folder in there if you need to. You can rename some of the files again if you need to, but that's just a good first step. Also adding shortcuts is a really good thing. So shortcuts are good if you have something in two places, like if you have a document in a shared drive, but you also want to have access in your drive, you can add a shortcut that way. But the main thing I want to focus on here with shortcuts is actually on the left side here, instead of going to my drive, go down to shared with me. And here are all the files and folders that anyone has ever shared with me. And they're just sitting in there. These are the most recent on top, and you can't do anything in here to organize. You can't add another folder. You can't move any of these documents, but there is one thing you can do. You can add shortcuts. And so the like the document that I'm sharing with you, that document is housed in my drive or our team drive. You don't have it in your drive. So when you open this link, it's going to go to your shared with me folder. But if you want to be able to access it easily and not have it get buried in other things, you can add a shortcut to it, and then it would be much easier to find. So I'm going to do a shortcut to this back to school presentation right here. And when I go down to organize, the second option here is add shortcut. So whenever I do that, it gives me the same options as when I moved my file. It gives suggested, starred, and all locations. So I want this document really handy to me, so I'm just going to put it in my drive for now, and it suggests that right here. I will give you another little detail. If one of these is not a great suggestion, you can click the three dots and say, not a helpful suggestion. So just know that's there. So I've just added a shortcut. Notice, didn't move the document, didn't do anything to the document, but when I go back to my drive, I now have this shortcut to the back to school. So now I have easy access. So that's the best way, in my opinion, to organize, really the only way to organize your shared with me documents. And I know it's a shortcut because it has a little arrow pointing to the slides icon. Now, say I don't need this document anymore. I don't want to have it anymore. A shortcut, if you right click and move to trash, it will delete the shortcut. Okay. And so it's still in my shared with me, but I just don't want the shortcut anymore. That's no problem. One other thing that you can do for organization is you can use the starred feature. And I just started using that this year. Actually, one of my coworkers pointed it out to me, and I've used it ever since. So say I really want this alarm image, handy. I need to work with this. I need to use this on an upcoming professional development. If I right click and go to organize, I can go to add to starred. When I click that, looks like nothing happens, right? Because it doesn't move the document. It just adds it pretty much to my favorited list. It's very similar to favorites. So over here on the left side, we have starred. So here I have a few documents, recent documents I've been working with, and even a folder. You can do it with folders and documents. And you can go to your star just to look at things. It's really good for ongoing or current projects. I have a starred set a star. I look at my starred every morning whenever I get to work because those are my current projects I have going on. Say I'm finished with this alarm picture. That project's done. I don't need to look at it anymore, at least every day. If you go to organize, you can remove it from your starred list. And it doesn't change its actual location. Okay, those are our first 5 must-haves for organization. There are 2 that are going to be an extension of what we just talked about. One, when you go back to your drive, when you're looking at your file names and your folder names, there's a few little key things I want you to look at. So I do recommend you go in this order for your organization, like look at those poorly named, untitled names first, create folders, do your shortcuts, and then now you can take a little closer look at your file names and folders. One thing you may want to consider is having similar or consistent naming conventions. For example, in my math folder here, this is from COVID times, and I'm going to change it to list view. I had a folder for each of my grade level teachers when I was the math specialist at the time. So they have the same name, but different grade level. When I click in one, I have all the different categories, and I also have the videos and resources by week. So I made very similar names for my documents. That's not required, but it's a good organizational tool because that way it's easier to find things when you're looking for them. So that's one suggestion I have. It's kind of next level on the names. Another thing you can do with your folder names is right now they're in alphabetical order. You can change A to Z, Z to A. You can change it by last modified, last opened. But if you want a folder to stand out, there's two things you can do. One is like I just made my Pear Deck folder. I have a lot of Pear Deck items in here. If I don't want my Pear Deck folder over here, if I rename it, if I add a symbol at the beginning, like an asterisk or a pound sign or a dollar sign, any of those symbols, it automatically takes it to the front because before A, it'll do the symbols up there. So that's one thing you can do. Or you can get a little more specific and you can even add an emoji. To get to the emojis, you hit the Windows icon on your keyboard and then the period, and then these pop up. So for Pear Deck, they have a pear, so I could use that. And because it's an emoji or symbol, it also brings it to the beginning. So that's one way to kind of organize your folders if you want certain ones at the very beginning. Also, if you right click and go to organize, you can change the folder color. This is also something I discovered recently, and I really like doing this because it helps with certain folders stand out. So Pear Deck, I can do like a green color. And so it can stand out with the green. It can also stand out with the symbol or emoji at the beginning. One other thing that I've seen and done before is say, all of these are very important. These first few, I work out of them all the time. But this one over here, I really don't check that often. Another thing I could do to manipulate the order is I can put the letter Z at the end like this, and it automatically takes it to the end because it's alphabetical. So you can get creative with your titles if you want to put them in a certain order and it doesn't fit conventionally into the A to Z. Now, one thing I do want to point out, especially if you're a classroom teacher, is that if you are in a Google Classroom or teach out of a Google Classroom, or are a co-teacher in a Google Classroom, you automatically have a classroom folder that generates. So whenever I open my classroom folder, remember this is in your student account, only your student account. In here, I have all of my folders for the classes that I'm currently teaching in Google Classroom, which are my self-paced courses. I'm the teacher for Kahoot, Pear Deck, and Eduphoria. So I actually color-coded these folders to make them stand out to me because I'm teaching those. The ones that have the little shortcuts, those are the classes that I'm a co-teacher in right now. So I have access to what has been added to the classroom, what has been turned in from the classroom, but they're not in my folder. Notice it says shared with me, okay, because it doesn't belong in mine. Now, there was a question on, I think, the pictures on the folders. Oh, the pair. Is that what you mean? Okay. To get the emojis, what you do is on your keyboard, look down at your keyboard. You should have a Windows button, like the Windows. Okay, you hit Windows, hold it down, and then hold the period down. And then it shows up, yes. And then you can search in there. Excellent. Okay, so back in the classroom real quick, I also have the classes that I'm a part of. So I'm in all of the history classes. They use that for curriculum and instruction, so I'm enrolled in those. So I'm in here. I haven't turned anything in because I just use it for resources, but it is all located in here. So I wanted to point that out. And in these folders, like in my Kahoot one, I have everything I've put in there. I have everything that's been turned in. You can organize those. If I wanted to put all my bronze certificates in a folder, all my silver, I could totally organize it as much as I wanted to. So I wanted to point that out to you. The next thing I want to point out is shared drive. So we've been working out of my drive the whole time. And as far as organization goes, all of these same principles apply for the shared drives, right? Making the folders, looking at the file names. It's things that you want to look at. But a shared drive is really important if you have documents that all of your team uses. So that way you'll have access to all the documents. And this is the most important thing. If someone leaves from your team, all of the documents stay in place. You're not going to lose access. If I share this document with y'all today, but I left the district tomorrow, you wouldn't be able to access this document if it was in my drive. But if I had it in my team shared drive, you would still have access because the access belongs to the shared drive. So I highly recommend it if there's documents that your team uses, they need to be in a team shared drive. So there's a few ways to make one. When you're in shared drives, when you click on it, it's on the left side. You can right click and do a new shared drive, or you can click new when this is selected, you can click new and it'll do a new share drive. So I can do test drive. And it automatically brings me in there. And there's a few things I want to point out in here. Whenever you click on the name and you bring files in, you move files in the same way that you do that we already described. But there's a few settings I want you to look at. First is manage members. If you add a new member to your team, you choose their access. They can be a manager, a content manager, viewer, commenter, or contributor. It depends on what you're trying to accomplish. If you want everyone on the team to be able to edit the documents, you need those rights. If it's for your teachers and you just want them to be able to see them, maybe make a copy, they can be a viewer. So you have to make that decision. And you also want to look at the shared team settings because it defaults to these settings where it allows people who aren't in the drive to access files and things like that. But this top one's not checked. Allow people outside of Goose Creek to access files. If you're trying to share between your student account and your staff account, you'll need to check this box because it considers our student accounts outside of Goose Creek. So just keep that in mind. It depends on what you're trying to do with your drive, but if you want to share it with both accounts, you need to make sure and check this off so you're able to share in between. So I highly recommend shared drives. My last one is actually, I'm going to go out of Drive, but it is an additional layer of organization, and that's using Chrome bookmarks. So right now I am in Google Chrome for my web browser, and I'm logged into my account over here. And right now I have my bookmarks tab showing. So when you click more, which is the three dots here, and you go down to bookmarks, you have a few options. You can bookmark this tab, like I could bookmark this tab that I have right here. I can bookmark all tabs, and then I can also choose to show my bookmarks bar or not. So right now I have it showing. If you don't, this is what it looks like. So some people don't know it's there because it's not by default visible. So go three dots, bookmarks, and then show bookmarks bar. So this is a new drive of mine. Right now I have like a link to my drive, to my Gmail, to Google Classroom. Say I wanted to add a link to this test drive so that way I can get to it very quickly. There's a few things I can do. I can actually just, I learned this last year too. I can just drag this. If you do the lock right here in the URL, you can drag it down into the bar and put it right here. So now I have a link to my test drive. So say I'm over here in my regular drive. I click this link, but now I want to go back to my test drive. I can just click this and it goes straight to that drive. So it's just a fast way to do it. And I do it with my Gmail as well. That's just one thing. You can also click on the three dots, go to bookmarks, and click on bookmark this tab. So that's another way you can do it. You can change the name, decide where it goes, but I highly recommend it. That was my 10th must-have for Google Drive for organization. The last thing I want to point out is at the end of the handout, I have a link for Google Skillshop, and Google Skillshop has different courses for all of Google Workspace that you have access to. That's free, so if you want to check that out, we have that. Thank y'all for joining today. I appreciate it.